Welcome. I'm Pastor Craig Miller at First Alhambra Methodist. Today is August 22nd. We're going to be talking about watering. Let us open up with a word of prayer. Dear God, we are parched. Our mouths are dry. We long for cool, calm water. Lead us to the river that never runs dry, and quench our thirst with your hope and love. Amen. Well, as we've been looking at our garden, it's fun to see all the different steps that it takes to develop a garden. It's not as simple as we may think. There's determining what kind of plant you want to grow by looking at the seeds, finding the right location, making sure you have the correct tools, the actual planting in the ground of the seeds, and then seeing if they sprout. And today we're talking about watering the plants. How are you taking care of those plants? So water is something that we're all too familiar with in terms of how vital it is to our life and our well-being. We've seen this become more and more important, especially here in Southern California, as we've been experiencing water shortages and the drought. When I was thinking about water, I thought back to my 8th grade science project. It was in the late 1960s. And I built a relief map of the California Water Project. I had a 4x4 board and had used plaster Paris to make a relief map of California, and then drew in where the California aqueduct was going to be. This was before it was actually built. I don't remember if I won anything from that project, but I do remember having plaster Paris all over the kitchen table and driving my mom crazy as I was putting it together and making quite a mess in the kitchen. But if we think about the California Water Project as an amazing thing. The water comes all the way from Northern California, back at the Orwell Dam and Reservoir where it starts, and the Feather River. And then through a series of canals, the water comes all the way through the Grapevine, up through the passes, and back down into our area and put into reservoirs for us to use. We also have water coming from the Colorado River Aqueduct and from the Central Orizona project as well. So we have many sources of water that are being funneled into Southern California because the reality is we live in a desert. If it wasn't for the people who thought this up, we would not have enough water to live in this area as the most populous state in the United States. We're able to have enough water. Now, during our current drought, we're not as bad off as you may think because about 10 years ago, they built a new reservoir out in the San Bernardino area, and it is completely full. So we can draw on that even though our water has been going down. But just this week in Pasadena, for example, they said you can only water on certain days of the week, and they're encouraging us to save water. So this is a reminder of the vitality and importance of water for life, for our lives and for the lives of all living things. And in California, a large percentage of the water, over 50% or maybe even more, goes to agriculture. You know all those almonds you like to eat? Well, those almond trees take a lot of water to grow. In our passage today, we have this very interesting story of Jesus and his encounter with a man who had been sitting by a pool of water. Let's take a look to see what implications this story might have for us today. John 5, 1-4 says, "After this there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had." Notice the words that I highlighted here, the stirring of the water. That is quite a scene. When you think about it, here was this pool inside of Jerusalem, the capital city, the most prosperous city of the area. But in this area, there was all these people who had incurable disease. And they were just waiting and hoping to be healed. And their hope was focused on the water. If the water stirred, they believed an angel was in the water. And if they jumped in, they would be healed. And whoever jumped in first would be the lucky person who had their disease taken away. Now, as we think of the scene, we may think, well, that was just in the past. But think of the areas in our communities where there's people just waiting for the stirring of the water, that they may be helped or cured. Think about your own life. Is there a particular medicine you're hoping you get, or if there's a particular vitamin you take you think is going to stir the water and make you whole and healed? This is a very common thing for us to look at. I mean, if you take a look at the history of Coca-Cola, which was made in Atlanta by a pharmacist. Of course, the reason it was called Coca-Cola was because the original recipe had something called cocaine in it. And it was sold as a medicinal medicine. It was thought if you drank this drink, you would be healed and you would be healthy. Well, they had to change the recipe, and it's still a secret recipe, but originally it was thought to be something that would make you whole and healthy. So there's a lot of things that we see that we are offered and promises made that we will be just right if we do this particular thing or if we take that particular thing. There is a pool, and we're waiting for it to be stirred. And if we just jump in and grab whatever it is, our lives will be made complete. Now, a certain man was there who had an infirmity for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he already had been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" Now let that sink in for just a minute. Do you want to be made well? This man had been there 38 years, waiting to be the first one in the water, but hadn't made it yet. And Jesus' question to him is, "Why have you been here all these years? Wasn't there something else you could have done, or any other choices you could have made?" You can almost see Jesus thinking this as he asked that man that question. Do you want to be made well? Well, if we look at ourselves, we can see that that is a question we probably don't want to confront. Because we know there are certain things that we could change that would make us better. Maybe it's exercise or the food we eat, things like that. Certain habits, if we changed, we would be healthier and maybe live a longer life. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, do you want to be made well? Recently, I decided to give up processed meats like ham and deli turkey and those types of things. Bacon and sausage, all out the door. Because they talk about the nitrates in them and how bad they are for you. But of course, that meant giving up ham sandwiches, or bacon and eggs, or my favorite, the BLT sandwich. But the choice is there. I mean, the information is there for me to make. I mean, there is the research out there that says if you keep eating those processed meats, it's going to be bad for you. It's not healthy. Just like if you drink that good old Coca-Cola all the time. There are certain things we know that we probably shouldn't be eating or drinking, but we do it anyway because the desire for those things outweigh the benefits that would have happened if we didn't do them anymore. Well, so far, so good. I've been able to stop eating the processed meat, basically because I just don't buy it or keep it in the refrigerator. I must admit, I did get a slab of bacon a couple of weeks ago, but haven't cooked it yet. Sometimes you just want to have that particular taste. But that's a very strong question for each of us to answer. Do you want to be made well? Because if we answer yes, it means we're going to have to make changes. And the question is, do we really want to make those changes? The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. While I am coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said to him, Rise, take up your bed and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed, and walked. Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool. Now, I don't want to be harsh on this particular gentleman, but it helps us to think about this in terms of our own particular lifestyles. Here the man was basically blaming everyone around him for his particular issue, for his problem. He wasn't taking ownership for it. It was the other people's fault that they got in the water before him, and no one would help him get into the water. But Jesus saw it from a different perspective. He said to him, Forget the water, get up and walk. And the man did. Notice Jesus didn't say, Your faith has made you well. There was something in the authority of Jesus' voice that broke the man out of his way of looking at his life. And he was able to say, Wait, there is another way. I can be changed, not because I have to jump into the water, but because of the decisions that I'm making. Now, please don't hear me wrong. Certainly there are illnesses and conditions over which we have very little control. And we look to the medicines and the doctors to help us to be made whole and to be cured. Those are a different story. What we're talking about here are the things that we may say to ourselves that keeps us from actually making the changes that we need to make. A couple of years ago, I was reviewing a book with one of my colleagues, and the book was The Power of Habits. It seems that we develop habits in a particular order. And if we're able to identify what starts the cycle of a particular habit, we're able to make a change. So my colleague was constantly biting her nails, and she was getting sick of doing that. So whenever she thought of biting her nails, instead, she would take out her hand and knock her knuckles on the table. Now that may seem to be somewhat silly way of approaching changing a habit, but she was consistent with doing that. And after a week, she no longer had a desire to chew on her nails. She was able to break that cycle. So the power of habits are very strong for us, the habits that cause us to do particular things. And here we see that instead of looking at others and saying it's their fault that I'm in this particular situation, Jesus is saying something else. Look at yourself. What is it that you can change, of which you have control over? See if that will make the difference that you are looking for. Don't be in the doldrums anymore. Get up and walk. John 5, verses 9 through 12 says, And that day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said to him who was cured, It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. He answered them, He who made me well said to me, Take up your bed and walk. Then they asked him, Who is the man who said to you, Take up your bed and walk? That phrase, It is not lawful for you to carry your bed, was stated by the Jewish leaders because they were not happy about it. Notice they weren't celebrating that he had been cured. Obviously, they had seen that man sitting there for years. He was probably an institution around that pool. Everyone knew who he was. But here, he was walking. He was cured. He wasn't going to be there anymore. Sadly, when we make changes in our lives, sometimes the people around us are not so happy. They may almost benefit from the condition that you've had. Or maybe if you make a change, it forces them to take a look at their lives as well. So think about that. Do you know someone who has made a dramatic change? And instead of saying to them, wow, that's really great, you said, why in the world did you do that? Weren't you happy before? But here Jesus is saying in this story that even the people around us may not appreciate it when we make changes in our life, even if it's changes for the better. But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Hear those words again from Jesus. See, you have been made well. Sin no more. Here, Jesus is reminding us that making change is not easy. And he's also saying something else that's very true when we look at making changes in our lives. How easy it is to do the things we're supposed to do, and we start feeling really, really good but then we go back and do the things that we were doing before. And we lose everything that we had done. And Jesus is saying, no, don't do that. Sin no more. Relish the new life that you have. Of course, this was just the very beginning of Jesus' ministry. And later on, we would discover the power of Jesus to change not only the physical condition of people, but the heart of people as well. Jesus calls us today to look to the water. Is the water being stirred? Is there something in your life that you know that you need to change? That will help you be a better person, a healthier person, help you have better relationships with others? Jesus calls you and says, jump in. Jump into the water that is being stirred right in front of you and be made new. So the water is there, and it's waiting for you. The angel has already stirred it up, and the Spirit of Jesus is calling to us. What is it that Jesus is calling you to do this day? What changes is he calling you to make? Is it the way that you worship or your spiritual practices? Is it something that has to do with your friends or relatives? Something that you need to make a change in terms of those relationships? Something that you can do to make those better? Is it something to do with your health, with your exercise, or what you're eating? Does it have to do with what you spend your time doing in terms of what you watch on TV or what you're doing with others? Does it have to do with how you treat others around you, those who you do not know? How are you serving those in the community who are in need, who are still sitting around the pool, hoping for something to change? I encourage you today to look anew at this story of the man who sat by the pool of Bethsaida and to see what lessons you can learn from him and his interaction with Jesus as you look at yourself deeply this day. Be encouraged, for Jesus says to us all, get up and walk. Let us join together in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Before we hear our concluding song, receive this benediction. Dear God, give us the wisdom and desire to bear the fruits of the Spirit, against which there is no law: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Amen.
I can hear my Savior calling. I can hear my Savior calling. I can hear my Savior calling. Take thy cross and follow me. I'll go with him through the judgment. I'll go with him through the judgment. I'll go with him through the judgment. I'll go with him all the way. Where he leads me, I will follow. Where he leads me, I will follow. Where he leads me, I will follow. I'll go with him all the way. He will give